So I'm going to show you how to design this card. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make the backing of the card. That's the beige section. So I'm going to create a shape. We're going to take a square. And what I need to do is I need to make it the correct dimensions. And if you notice, there's a lockdown here. So basically what that means is that right now the shape, if I change the size, is going to move proportionally. So what I need to do is I need to open the lock. And then I'm going to move it up to 0 so that I can make the correct size. And I can use the ruler at the top of the page to determine what size it needs to be. Now, we talked about it before. It needs to be 5 3/4 by 8 3/4. So I'm going to just drag that down here. 5 3/4 by 8 3/4. And then I'm going to scoot it and lock it up again, just in case something happens and I start messing around with it and it changes size. At least it'll change size proportionally. So the first thing I want to do for my own sanity is I want to change this color. We're going to change the color of the items to the same color that they are in real life. And that's mainly because then when I go to cut at the end, all of the cuts, all of the things that are on navy paper will go in one mat, and all of the things in gold paper will go on another mat, and all of the things in the cream color paper, etc., and the brown will all go in their separate mats. So I'm going to move this back up to the top, but I'm not going to move it over to the left. The next thing I need to score. So there's something called a scoring tool, which is basically a tool that allows you to draw a line, a crease line. There we go. It lets you put a crease line into a shape. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to shapes, and it's down here in the bottom of the shapes, bottom right-hand corner. And I'm going to create a score line. And I'm going to, oh, there it is. Sorry. It's already there. So the first thing I need to do is I'm going to drag it over to the right so I can use my guidelines over here to determine how this works. And I'm going to drag it so that it's horizontal, but I'm going to use the guidelines so that it is actually horizontal and not kind of horizontal. That looks good. I'm going to make it longer. I'm going to drag it back over here. And I'm going to go halfway through, which is about 4 3/8. So 2/8 is a quarter, so it's a little bit more than that. I'm going to make it a little bit longer. Now, I have 2 sections. I want to make sure that what I have is correct. Yes. Okay, so now here's what I need to do. Right now, these 2 things are going to move separately because they're not connected. You see how that works? And I don't really want that. I want these 2 things to move together from now on. So what I need to do is I need to select them, and I just drag across and select, and now it's selected everything in here. And if you can look over to the left, you see that it has the line, the score line, and the square together. And I'm going to group them and attach them. And what that does is when I go to cut, it keeps the score line in the actual shape. If I don't attach them, then the score line goes somewhere else. It'll cut a score line somewhere that's not in the shape, and then it'll cut the shape. So I want the 2 things to be together. So therefore, I create a score line. So these 2 things, or I weld it together. I'm sorry, I attach it. So these 2 things are together. The next thing I want to do is I want to create, so I'm going to do the easy stuff first. I'm going to create my blue field that's in the background. So I'm going to go to shapes, go to square. We're going to just do the same process. I'm going to unlock it. I'm going to put it right on top of what I want it to cover. But I don't want to cover all the way. I want to leave some white space around the edges. I just kind of like it more like a frame. And then I'm going to lock it in. And I'm going to color it navy. And I'm going to make that darker. You don't really have to, but I'd like it to be the colors, or as close to the colors that it's actually going to be, so I can see what I'm doing. All right, so I have these two things together, and because they're going to cut on different pieces of paper, I don't need to attach those two things. All right, so I'm going to leave it there just so I can see what I'm doing. So the next thing that I need to do is I need to create the letters, and I need to create the belt. So let's start with the belt. That's a little more complicated. So the first thing I need to do is I need to come up with a square, because the belt is made of two rectangles. And remember, we don't have a rectangle shape. So I have to take a square. I have to change the dimensions of the square. I'm going to make it like an inch. It's a little bit bigger than it is in my model. And I'm going to place it here because I want it to go all the way across. And I'm going to drag it all the way across. Now, if you noticed in my card, and I'm going to lock it, if you noticed in my card, there were two sections to the belt. It wasn't one continuous section. I actually try to do it like a real belt. So what we're going to do is first of all, we're going to change the color to brown, because that's what color card it will be. And then that way I don't have to do it later. So we're going to duplicate this, and we're going to do two things. I wanted them to be the same size so that I could reasonably manage what I was going to do and know that height-wise, they're both going to be the same height, even when I'm done. All right, so that's why I duplicated them. Duplicate is in the upper right-hand corner. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start by cutting the first one. And to do that, let me go back a little bit. I want to cut this one to make it short so it can go over on this right-hand side. So what I do is I get my square, and this is a slightly more complicated thing to do. I want to increase the length of my square. And we're going to give it about 2 inches. I'm going to lock that back up. And we're going to do something called a slice. So what I want to do is I want to group these two things together. And I'm going to hit group up top. So I selected them both, and I hit group up top. And now down here, there's a button that says slice, and I'm going to slice it. And what it does is it cuts one shape into the other. So now my, remember back in the 80s, you put your chocolate in my peanut butter, you put your peanut butter in my chocolate. It's the same kind of thing. So I've cut both a rectangle out of the square and a square out of the rectangle. So I take the pieces apart that I don't want. Okay. And I'm going to move this down. I'm going to be lazy and select all three of these. And I'm going to hit delete. So now on the right-hand side, I just have this one little piece. On the left-hand side, I had a curved piece, a curved end like a belt, like a man's belt. So here's what I have to do is I have to do that with a circle. So I'm going to do the same general principle, only this one's a little more complicated. So you see my circle, and I'm going to unlock it, and I'm going to drag it over. And I want it to be a little bit less pointy over here. So I'm going to make it a little bit longer. And I'm going to lock it first before I start moving things around. And I'm going to stick it over top of my shape. Now, I cut the one on the right-hand side, so the smaller piece, at about 2 inches. And I want there to be overlap. So I'm going to cut this at about 1.5 inches. Let's scoot this over. So now I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to select these two things. I'm going to group them, and I'm going to slice them. Now this time, I'm getting rid of the circle. I'm getting rid of the gray part of the circle. And I'm getting rid of the little nubbin on the end. So now I'm going to have the left side of my belt. And hopefully all of this worked well. And they overlap. Look at that. Oh, I'm so excited. Now I can get rid of all this extra. So I'm going to select it all, and I'm going to exit. Now we need to do the belt buckle and the word dad. So let's start with the word dad. That's probably going to be the easier thing. So I'm going to go over here to the left, and above where I selected shapes, I'm going to select text. So I'm clicking on text, and I'm going to caps lock, and I'm going to type in dad. Now, this is a fine font, but this isn't going to do what I need it to do. There are fonts that are single layer fonts, and there's fonts that are multiple layer fonts. This is a single layer font, and most of the free fonts in Cricut are single layer fonts. Most of the fonts that you can download from your Microsoft Word or your system fonts are going to be single layer fonts, but they do have multi-layered fonts. I don't know where to find them free, but I do know that they are in Cricut. So instead of using this free font, I did actually pay for a font. So it's the only thing I paid for this card. And I'm going to go, and it's called Martha Stewart. And it's Martha Stewart's Home Team. And I'm going to click that. Now, if you look over here to the right, all the way over, you have the letter D that's cut, and you have the eyeball that is open. So you can see that. But we also have the letter D that's not cut, or that's a cut. It's the outline of the letter D, and it's turned off. You can't see it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make it so that we can see it. All right, so now we have the background layer and the front layer, and we have to ungroup them. Now, you want to do this once, not twice, because if you ungroup it twice, it not only takes the back layer and the front layer apart, it also takes the individual letters apart. So we don't want to do that because then it'll make it messy. So we just want to ungroup it once, and then we'll be able to move the letters from the background. We need to make the background the right color. And we need to make the foreground gold. So we're going to go here and just make it that color gold. So we put these two back together. Now, here's the thing. We're going to group these again, just for right now, because then we'll ungroup them again so they can move separately. Now, here's the thing. That's not what I would call impressive. So we need to lengthen the letters. So the reason that I group these back together is so that when I lengthen the background and lengthen the letters, I lengthen them at the same rate. So we're going to click on this. We're going to unlock it, and we're going to just drag it vertically. Maybe not so much. There we go. So now I have my letters, my front and my back. So I'm going to ungroup them so that they will cut separately. I didn't do this over here because I didn't want to ungroup something else or select something else as I was trying to do this. So I have these two layers that'll cut separately. Oh, there's one other thing that I want to do. And it's not necessary, but I am lazy. I want to make sure that the DAD, these three, and then the DAD background are attached to each other. Not the background to the foreground, but the three foreground letters are attached to each other. So I'm going to select these, and I'm going to attach them. And that way they cut as DAD on my field, or on my mat. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to attach them. I don't need to weld them because I don't need the letters to like stay together. It's not cursive. We'll talk about that in another day, on another day. So now, oh, I need to arrange. So this works just like any other program where you're drawing. You have your background where your foreground should be and your foreground where your background should be. So I have the foreground selected, and I'm just going to go to arrange, and I'm going to move it forward. Now, oh, all is right with the world. The last thing that we need is a belt buckle. So we're going to make the belt buckle out of several shapes, and we're going to cut, and we're going to slice, or we're going to shape, and we're going to slice. So we're going to go and we're going to create a square that is just a little bit bigger than the belt buckle. All right, so that's going to be kind of our first shape. And I'm going to extend it a little bit. I'm going to make it a little bit longer, but not much. And lock it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to round the edge of this. Well, the very first thing I want to do is I want to change the color. All right, so now the belt buckle, the beginning is the belt buckle, and the foreground letters are the same color. So they will all cut on the same mat. So now, first thing I want to do is I want to round the front edge of the belt buckle just a little bit. So I'm going to go back to shapes, and we're going to pick the circle again. And I'm not going to play with the size of the circle because this seems to be pretty good for shaping this. So I'm going to group these together just like we did before. And I'm going to slice. And I'm going to get rid of the stuff that I don't want. And since all we wanted to do was round the square a little bit, we're going to get rid of all things circle and the little edges of the gold square. And delete. So the next thing I need to do is I'm going to duplicate this. And I want to make a smaller version on the inside to where it looks like a buckle. So we're just going to make this a little bit smaller. In fact, we're going to make it just a hair bigger than the belt itself. And we're going to put this on the inside. And we're going to slice again. So group it or select it, slice it. And I can get rid of the inside shape and delete these two. All right. But now we need the little like notch in the belt, right? So not the holes, but the little thingy that sticks out of the belt so that it looks a little more realistic. So to do that, we have to put two shapes together. So we're going to take this circle and put it over here. I'm going to start by making it the correct color before I forget. And we're going to change the size and shape. We want it to be teeny tiny. So it's going to be thin. It's going to be little, like a little grain of rice. Is that too big? Let's put it over here. That seems a little big. So we're going to continue to size it. All right, let's put this here. Now, here's the thing. I would like this to all cut as one piece, not multiple pieces. So I want it to all be one thing. And if you notice, there's black lines around the round piece. And that means the machine is going to do what I tell it to do. And those lines are telling it to cut. So I want to get rid of that particular set of lines. So I'm going to group this, or I'm going to select it. And I'm going to weld the two pieces together. So now all of a sudden it's one shape. And I'm just going to move this over here so I can see all the pieces of the card. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we designed our Father's Day card. All the pieces are there. It took me, I don't even know, about 10, 15 minutes. So this is how you design a Father's Day card. You can use this process now that you've seen what it looks like to use multi-layered letters, what it means to slice and what it means to cut, what it means to slice and what it means to weld. You can actually now engineer any type of card that you want. So art is two things in a lot of cases, and crafting is definitely two things. You have the side of it that is the vision. So what do I want to make? What's going to be pretty? What's going to make me happy? And then you have the other side of it, which is the engineering side. How do I make that happen? How do I execute that? So in this case, we've now used the computer to engineer a card that aesthetically makes me happy. So that being said, I would save the project. I already have it saved somewhere else, but I'm going to save it again. And I'm going to call it Dad Card 2. And I'm going to save it. And then that way I don't have to redesign it. I'm going to hit the check mark. And then the next thing that you'll see is you'll see exactly how to put it on the mats and how to cut it. All right. Thank you.